Hey, Washington, D.C., this is Tony Browder. I want to thank you all for coming along with me for this 20th edition of the Browder File Show here on WPFW. I am excited about every show, but I'm particularly excited about this show, as you will soon find out. But a couple of things I want to talk about just to get the program started. There are certain days that are part of our collective memories. For example, February 21st, 1965 is the day that Malcolm X was assassinated. And I still remember where I was that Sunday afternoon when my mother and I were watching television and got the news that Malcolm had been assassinated. February the 4th, 1968 was the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember where I was at that time, that I was driving my car with my buddies, getting off the expressway on our way home when we heard on the radio the King had been shot. And I said to my buddies, if King dies, all hell is going to break loose. And it did that evening. November the 4th, 2008 was the day that Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. So there's certain days, certain experiences that we have that are etched in your mind. And there are also dates that are part of our personal memory. Like we all remember our birthdays. We all remember, if you're a parent, you remember the birth date of your children. You remember the death of loved ones. Certain dates, again, are seared in our memory. People who excel in their chosen profession can often pinpoint the date that they realized what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. And for me, that occasion was February the 9th, 1990. That was a Friday. I had been invited to do a Black History Month presentation at a government facility in Southeast Washington, D.C. Now, I have been doing Black History Month presentations for Blacks in government for about 5 years, and I had just recently published my first book from the Browder File. So I was frequently invited to do Black History Month presentation at government facilities all across the country. So this wasn't new for me. But when I walked into this facility in Southeast DC on February the 9th, 1990, I was surprised to discover that this facility was a department of the CIA. It was a branch of the CIA in Southeast DC that analyzed satellite imagery. And so the brother who met me at security saw the surprised look on my face and he said, yeah, Black folk work for the CIA too. So I went into the auditorium and there was a full program there. We had a choir from a local school singing the Black National Anthem. We had a couple of speakers that preceded me. And then I was introduced to the audience by the director of this facility. And I was surprised by what he said and equally surprised by what he didn't say. This guy came up to the podium and recited my bio from memory, verbatim. He did not miss one single word. But what tipped me off was the last line of my bio. He deviated from the last line of my bio, which says that Tony Browder is a chronicler of facts and information relative to the positive portrayal of the worldwide African experience. But he said, Tony is in the same business we're in. And I set up as soon as he said that. He said, the exception is he gathers information relative to the positive portrayal of people of African ancestry. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Browder. So I came up, I did my presentation. But later that evening, as I was reflecting on the day, reflecting on my introduction, the full impact of that intentional modification of my introduction really hit me. I'm at the CIA, and here's the director of the CIA telling the audience that I'm in the same business that they're in. And I thought about the work that I've been doing for, over a decade by that time. My job is to gather intelligence, historical information about Black people, to analyze that information, and then to share my analysis with my targeted audience, Black folk. That has been my job. That has been my life for the past 45 years. I read books. I would attend conferences and meet the authors of the books that I've read. I then began organizing conferences here in DC and brought the authors of my favorite books to DC to introduce them to my community here. I've traveled the world with some of these authors, traveled around the world to discover information that I had never been exposed to, or to discover other interpretations of the information that I had been exposed to, primarily in school. And I've written books about my work and my discoveries. But then, when some of the people who have influenced me have died, I then began the process of creating projects to ensure that their memories would live on. I created the Asa Restoration Project in 2008 to honor the memory of Asa Hilliard. And I spent 15 years excavating tombs on the West Bank of Egypt as a result of this project that I created to honor my dear friend. I'm proud of my latest creation, which is the John Henrik Clarke Enhanced History Project, which was created to honor the legacy of Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And so I have three guests today who will help me introduce Clarke Enhanced History Project to you. My guests are Free Benjamin, or Benjamin, I'm sorry, Free Benjamin, the surrogate mother of the Clarke Enhanced History Project, Jerome Page, who is the recorder of birth for the Clarke Enhanced History Project, and Atlantis Browder, who is the Prime Minister of the Clarke Enhanced History Project. So I'm going to speak first with Atlantis Browder, not just because she's my daughter, because she's got to run out in a few minutes to run some errands. So I wanted to make sure that we would hear from her voice. But as many of you should know, Atlantis is my daughter. In 1991, Atlantis was the youngest published author in America, having written her first book, My First Trip to Africa, when she was 8 years old. And by the time she went to college, Hampton University, she had written more books than her professors. So Atlantis Browder, how are you? Welcome to the Browder File Show. I don't know if you've ever heard of this show before, but welcome. How are you doing?
Hey, Dad. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you're a very busy person. Uh, so thank you for taking the time to be with us. So I introduced you as the Prime Minister of the Clarke Enhanced History Project. And the reason why I preference that title is that your primary job is to administer the information of the Clarke Enhanced History Project via your role as an educator. You're a great curriculum writer, and we have this project called Cultural Imperative Program, CIP, and the Clarke Project will become a part of that project. Can you speak briefly about the CIP and what that means and what you're doing with it?
Yes, I am delighted to do so. So, CIP, as you mentioned, stands for the Cultural Imperative Program. In 2019, we piloted CIP with about 5 different sites around the country. And in 2020, we rolled out this program nationally. And so I've been involved with CIP since then, but it's been such a wonderful experience, not just because I helped to develop the curriculum, which is amazing, if I might say so myself. But I've been excited to participate because of the impact that the program has had. So
So
before
who is the
I talk
program
so
impact?
right, yeah. So I was just getting ready to say. So before I talk
Okay,
about the impact, let me break it down.
okay.
We're not familiar with it. So CIP is a cultural enrichment program that we implement at the Saturday school, and it's really we've also been able to support a number of CIP sites to implement this program as an after school program as well. And this is a program that is designed specifically for high school students, ninth through 12th grade. And um, within this program, the students actually read your first publication from the Browder File, which is what the curriculum is centered around as well. And so one of the or I'll just say three of the primary goals of CIP is to help the students become critical thinkers, help them develop their critical thinking skills. And one of the reasons why that is so important is because, as we've come to understand, so many of our people have been miseducated. We know that mainstream education typically begins our history, African history, with slavery. And so, of course, we know that that is not accurate, but we teach young people the truth about who they are as people of African ancestry. And so we teach them how to uh, think critically by analyzing different information. And maybe you could bring me back on so we can dive a little bit deeper. But outside of becoming critical thinkers and independent thinkers, we really want them to develop a strong sense of cultural identity. Not only because our people have been miseducated, but we've also been disconnected from our history and our culture, who we are as people of African ancestry. And so we help them develop that sense of cultural identity by helping them to understand that our history does not begin in slavery, but in fact goes back thousands and thousands of years. Um, and
So
so,
how have they responded to these teachings, Elaine?
so one of the greatest responses that we've had, particularly from our students, is that they begin to love themselves more. They begin to see themselves differently. Um, in terms of um, the power that they have to create change, not only within themselves, but within their family and their community. So they develop a sense of confidence like we've never seen before. And even the parents of the students who are enrolled in this program, they attest to that fact that as students begin to learn who they are and develop that confidence, they are excited to engage in conversations, diving deeper about who they are and about their history. So within this program, they learn how to develop communication skills. They also learn to really just develop a deeper connection, not just with themselves and their history, but also with their community. So those are some of the goals or outcomes of the program. And even with educators who have served as facilitators for this program, they also have shared that um, student behavior also improves because they see themselves differently. They have a different perspective about who they are and what their potential is, and they learn to tap into that potential. They learn not to be afraid to tap into that potential, but being engaged in CIP has also um, improved their academic skills, their academic grades as well.
Okay. So based on the success that you've had with the CIP with high school students, how would you apply some of the same principles and teaching methodologies for the Clarke Enhanced History Project to share this information or introduce this information to a broader segment of our community, youth, adults, and elders?
So I'm sorry, repeat that again. So what's your question?
So, based on the success of the CIP program with high school students, how would you use the Clarke Enhanced History Project to teach a broader understanding of African and African American history to young people, to adults, and to elders?
Mhm. So I think the foundational piece is being able to have a better understanding of our history, being able to give context. The beautiful mural that I know Free Benjamin is going to talk about when she comes on is a great visual, but it also serves as a visual historical timeline. Um, that we can use as a teaching tool, because what I find is that so many of our people, youth and adults, they have bits and pieces of their history, but they don't really have any context. So putting things into a better perspective, they get to see the broader picture of who we are and how we have contributed to world history, culture, and civilization.
Okay, well, great. Well, we will be sharing more information about the application of the Clarke Enhanced History Project with regards to the cultural imperative program, because these are certainly times where this information is needed. The opening of the Clarke Project could not have come at a better time. I couldn't have written a better script for when this project should have been released, since we're now witnessing the erasure of African American history and culture, efforts to put us back into mental slavery. So I really look forward to you developing that curriculum and making this information available to a broader cross-section of our audience. You have an event coming up, a listening session for CIP. You've got that coming up soon. Can you share some information with us about that?
Yes, so the CIP interest meeting will be taking place this Saturday, April 12th. It is virtual. It takes place at 1 p.m. And so I do want to encourage your listeners, educators, community organizers, anyone who understands the importance of this knowledge that we're talking about, and they want to bring it to their city, to their communities. We want them to join us so that they can learn a little bit more about CIP, its impact, and how they can become involved. So whether that means hosting a CIP site, or parents who want their children or maybe grandchildren or nieces and nephews who they know could benefit from being in this program, we want to be able to share how you can enroll your child in a CIP program. So again, the interest meeting is going to take place this Saturday at 1 p.m. It will be virtual, and you can find information about the interest meeting on our website, which is ikgcip.com.
Can you repeat that again, please?
Yes, information about CIP as well as the interest meeting can be found on our website, which is www.ikgcip.com.
Great. But thank you, Atlantis. And I certainly will bring you back on to talk about what you're doing with a CIP for young folk, and what CIP will also do to enhance the understanding of the Clarke Enhanced History Project. So I know you got to run. Thank you so much for carving out some time for us today, and I will see you later.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. That was Atlantis Browder talking about the Cultural Imperative Program. And I want to switch now and bring in my second guest, Free Benjamin, who is a vocalist. She's a guitarist. She's probably, not probably, one of the best graphic artists in the business. I've had the pleasure of working with her for 20 years. So Free, how you doing?
Yes. I'm great. How are you all doing?
We're good. We're good. Welcome to the Browder
Excellent.
File.
Thank you. My pleasure, of course.
Okay, absolutely. So tell me a little bit, before we talk about the work that you've done with CIP, tell us a little bit about your creative life, your experiences as a vocalist, as a guitarist, and that as a graphic designer.
I feel like my creative life has been my destiny since the beginning, because I have never taken any jobs that did not involve art. And as far as singing, I don't ever remember not doing it. Music is my passion. Art is my passion. Black folks are my passion. And I have been doing all of those things pretty much all of my life. I entered a contest in elementary school. I don't know if you recall, and you used to see pictures in the magazines and they tell you to draw them and you mail it in and you get a little prize.
Mm-hmm.
I won. As a matter of fact, you know what? I found one of the letters. I found the letter telling me that I had won in my dad's stuff the other day. I was like, what? He kept this? I didn't even remember that existing.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you received that letter?
I don't remember. I need to go look at the letter again.
Okay. I assume you were, what, 10 or younger?
I was probably about that.
Okay.
I
Okay.
would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So how did you feel? How did you feel going back and recovering that memory of your childhood?
That's actually a memory that I've always had, but to see the fact that he kept that,
Mm-hmm.
it made it even more special and more important, and to know that it was that important to him that he kept it, and I had no clue that he kept it.
Yeah.
You know, so I saw so many things that I want to create a time capsule.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to create a family time capsule.
Okay. Okay.
But music is my passion, art is my passion, and I try to do it all with unconditional love, spreading love, messages of love,
Mm-hmm.
and keep it positive for the young people, for the old people, and to have my music, to have people walk away and not necessarily get the thing that I expected them to get, that I got from it, but to get something from it that touched their soul.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
we're familiar with the phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And the reason why the Chinese came up with that saying is that a picture, an image drawn or painted by an artist, not only is a beautiful recreation of a portrait or a landscape or something like that, but it also captures a piece of the soul of the artist, right?
That's right.
So when people see that creation or when they hear you performing, they are tapping into your soul. So it's a form, it's probably the ultimate form of solar communication, right?
Yes.
Solar energy, if you will.
SOUL, right?
SOUL, that's right, baby.
Yeah.
SOUL, soul to soul communication. And that's really what's missing from our lives today. We live in a society, unfortunately, which doesn't believe in the soul, which disrespects things associated with the soul. And so through singing, Black folk have always been able to touch the souls of others through art, through fashion, through the ways that we move in spaces is a way of expressing or extending our soul energy out into the
Absolutely.
spaces around us so that those who are in tune with that energy can internalize it and have a solar communication. So, in introducing my guest for the show, I refer to you as the surrogate mother of the Clarke Enhanced History Project, right? And I was very intentional about using that word because I had the ideas for the Clarke Project, but you were you were the person who gave birth to my ideas, right? And it's such a phenomenal relationship to have with an artist who can take an idea, take a concept, and then present it in a two-dimensional form that gives it a three-dimensional flavor, a four-dimensional flavor. So you've done that masterfully. We started off by working on the mural, the 25-foot long mural that Atlantis referenced, that represented 8,000 years of African success and excellence. Can you talk with our audience? Even though they can't physically see the mural now, they'll have an opportunity to see it later on. But even though they can't see the mural now, can you talk about what went into this creative process and what you hoped the outcome would be when people saw this?
First of all, let me say that it touched me deeply that you even asked me in particular to do this project. And I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely intimidating originally. And even some of the projects along the way felt intimidating. With the first piece, which to me is named From the Nile to the Potomac, and I think it's called African Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I learned a lot just from doing that project. I mean, that piece, I learned from doing all of the pieces. And to be able to incorporate well, this was the last thought, but to be able to incorporate, for example, one of our heroes and one of our kings in this project, Brother Ah, it was very moving for me. And he passed away like right when we finished. And then I was like, we got to get Brother Ah in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he is such a significant part, ancestral part, and living part of that piece that is very special to me personally.
Yeah, it's interesting because Brother Eyes, you said, was the last addition to that piece. There's so many elements in that piece, and there was a space that was just waiting to be filled. And Brother I was the right person to fill that space. And the role that he plays is like the role that Brother I played on WPFW. You know, he
Right.
opened the door for the ancestors to come. He was like Gabriel blowing his horn, calling us to rise up and do the things that we were born here to do. So
Right.
I couldn't help but feel, you know, you said you were kind of intimidated by me bringing you on to this project. Well, I knew instinctively that you were the right person to do this. And all the while we were working on this project, you know, that reality was confirmed because when I would give you an idea and saw what you had to share with me, I was blown away. You know, I was blown away by the energies that were working through you in order to give life to this vision, right? So in that regards, you are the surrogate mother. You gave life to this child, right? And now I would love to think that the world will benefit from this child that you helped bring into the world. And this child, like other children of special parentage or special heritage, these children will influence the consciousness of people and change them as well. So it is a spiritual process. You're absolutely right.
And can I say something about the, I mean, I can say something about several pieces, but on the field trips, you know how your field trip is like seeing things hidden in plain sight?
You mean the Egypt on the Potomac field trip?
Yes. I'm sorry, the
Yes,
Egypt on the
okay.
Potomac field trip.
Mhm.
And knowing that when people come off of the field trip, they're going to come back there and experience the murals, in particular, as an example of what I'm trying to say, is the essential reading wall.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that wall. One of my afterthoughts is, okay, and now it feels like, okay, you got these gems hidden in there, is to put, I called you and I was like, I had the idea, can you please set up your bookshelf and put some of this essential reading that our people need to be reading on your bookshelf, take a picture, and that's going to be incorporated into this piece. So now when people come to see the exhibit, they can look at the titles of those books that they never heard of and go get that book and read it and learn something about our history, like all of the books on there.
Right. And you know, I was kind of blown away that you would even ask me to do that. And I said, what the hell, man? What pictures? So you put me to work. But the end result was certainly worth it. And again, the idea is to put information before people's eyes so that they can now open their eyes. They can now see with their inner vision, their third eye, if you will, and begin to understand things that were always hidden in front of them. I want to reintroduce my guest. This is Free Benjamin. You're listening to the Browder File Show. I'm Tony Browder, and if I can, let me just expand the conversation and bring in my other guests. Free, don't go anywhere because I want you to be able to chime in as well. I want to bring in our third guest for this hour, and that is Jerome Page. And I refer to Jerome as the recorder of the birth of the Clarke Enhanced History Project. And the reason why I gave him that title was that several weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had a soft opening of the Clarke Project and had invited some people to come and just take a look at it and to gauge their response to what we had created in preparation for opening it to the public. And Jerome was there with his family, and 2 days later wrote this beautiful synopsis of the Africa's Eyes murals. And it just blew me out of the water. So Jerome, welcome to the Browder File. How are you doing, sir? No, you have to unmute yourself. Yep, you committed the cardinal sin of Zoom, brother.
There you go. I started talking without unmuting.
That's
Well,
okay.
Tony, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about your show. You said this is number 20. So
Yes.
you're counting, and that's great. Keep pumping out the airways, because you're a local personality from way back in the day. We used to listen to you on the radio on WOL and other places. We've been listening to you a long time, so
Yeah.
welcome back to the airways.
Well, thank you, man. And when I first met you and first heard your voice, you remember what I told you when I first heard you speak?
I don't remember that. What was that?
I told you that you sound like Askia Muhammad.
Oh, that's
You
right.
have the same inflections as Brother Askia. So every time I hear you, I always think of Askia. But you're a legendary figure here in DC. Before I really knew you, I was told by some folk, I'm not going to say who it was, that before some well-known political figures ran for office in DC, they would come and sit at your feet and get advice. You have expertise in finance, you have expertise in government, but also you have expertise in meditation and yoga. So you cover the whole spectrum, brother.
Yes, my interest and my practice varies. I have a vocation, and I break my life down into two parts. As a vocation, I'm an economic, business, and organizational development consultant. And my vocation is on meditation. And a couple of years ago, I branded myself as the meditativist. And as studying and practicing meditation, I thought it was important to bring together the inner clarity with outward action. And so it's not just enough to sit on the cushion and attain inner peace and inner clarity. But the purpose is to use that clarity to inform our actions and to create a better world. So I've got my concept of the meditativist, and hopefully soon my Substack will be up. But in the meantime, if folks want to find out more about what I'm doing, I have a website called What's on Jerome's Mind. That's no hyphens, no periods. whatsonjeromesmind.com. So they can check me out there as well.
Okay. And there's a lot to check out, lots of good things to check out. But listen, speaking of checking out, share with our audience some of the insights that you gained from looking at the mural that Sister Free produced. You just gave you presented me with a wonderful, descriptive, soulful analysis of this piece that I've been staring at for 3 years, and you made me see things and feel things that I didn't realize were there. So, talk with us a bit about what you saw and how it impacted you.
Well, let me give a little background. So, I mean, I've been on 3 of the field trips on the Egypt on the Potomac. So I've been on it 3 times. I take people there to do the tour, and I accompanied you on your 25th anniversary field trip to Egypt, and then prior to that, interacting with IKG over the years. So when I came into the mural, to view the mural, which we viewed that on March 22nd, and the official viewing starts this coming Saturday on April 12th at the Thurgood Marshall Center on 14th T Street there in Washington, D.C. So the other proviso is I'm part of a group called the D.C. Cultural Narratives, and we promised each other that if we went to a cultural event, we would write up something and it would be shared with the. So your project was actually the second of my writings for that group. The first one was I did a review of the Green Book exhibit at the Martin Luther King Library. And then the third one I just did about a week ago for the Joe Lovano Paramount Group, who performed here locally. A dear friend of mine, Will Calhoun of Living Color fame, was the drummer, so we went and checked him out. So when I and I had been on the second floor of the Thurgood Marshall Center several times, not since it's been renamed or rechristened the John Henrik Clarke, and I was just taken away by the significance of it. So you come up the steps or you get off the elevator, and there's this pillar there that has a background picture, a fading picture of John Henrik Clarke talking about the exhibit, talking about, and when I say the exhibit, they're actually, what is it? There are 12 sort of stations or 12 components of the full vision of the full museum piece. And looking over the stairway, there's this 25-foot mural that Free developed, and Penny just talked about that. And it takes us from the Nile to the Potomac. And it starts off with a Tekken, or some, Tekken is what people would often refer to as the same symbol as the Washington Monument. But 3,000, 4,000 years ago, it wasn't known as the Washington Monument. It was known as a Tekken. And a Tekken is a symbol that kind of reaches to the heavens, speaks to the gods, kind of transforming. So if we think about the mural on the left-hand side, it's 3,000, 4,000, 8,000 years ago. And on the right-hand side, 20 feet later, it's today. And that mural chronicles the journey of the African experience. So we start in Kemet, and then we witness visually the cosmology, we witness the architecture, we witness the greatness of those civilizations, the Nile Valley civilizations, and you have a book by that name. And then we move further from the left to the right. We're moving from the past more to the present. And then this omelet, this large head, which we find these mostly in Mexico and Central America. They became popular or more pronounced when Ivan van Sertima wrote his book about They Came Before Columbus. And then those visuals of these large heads with quote unquote Negroid features, how did they get there? And so for many people, that's evidence that before Columbus, Africans had made it to what ostensibly then, now we talk about the New World, but before the New World, we were there. We were pre-new. So, and then so we're going from left to right, from the past to the present. And then we come to the sort of horrific period of the Ma'afa, where we are taken away from our lands, stripped of our languages, stripped of our culture. And that's a very dark period in our history, so where we get severed from our greatness. This middle passage, or this Ma'afa, this Holocaust is one of the worst Holocausts in history. And but above that Holocaust in the mural, there's this bright light, and hovering in the bright light is the Sankofa bird, which is symbolic of looking back and looking forward. So while we are caught in this sort of horrific system of enslavement, and then the mural picks up the enslavement, post-enslavement period, referred to as Jim Crow, and on up to today, and then so we get closer to the 20 feet, there rises the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And that's symbolic for a number of reasons. For many of us who have visited that's become like a Mecca. But the importance of the mural and the importance of the John Henrik Clarke Enhancement Project was to document that our history began before slavery. one of the major critiques of the National Museum of African American History and Culture is that when you start in the basement, you're starting with a period of enslavement. And our story doesn't begin there. And what your work has done, Tony, and I'm really grateful for it, is to provide that corrective. And it says before slavery, we not only were we great, but it's not just Tony saying it, but it's most historians now that most of what we know came out of the Nile Valley. The Nile Valley was the birth of science, it was the birth of mathematics, it was the birth of law, it was the birth of responsibility, so that the greatness that we experience, that we've lived historically, is with the John Henrik Clarke Enhancement Project, is now something you need to see before you go to the National Museum of African American History, and something you need to see after you go to the National Museum of African American History. But go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you a question. So after having, seen that mural and internalized all of the history and culture and symbolism in that mural, what would you have to say? What would you like to say to Free for having created that piece?
Well, I would say, first of all, job well done. I mean, I'm also a student of the creative process, and I can just imagine what she went through to do that. So I would ask Free specifically, what was the moment that it all became clear that what the vision was, what the image was, what the story that you wanted to convey in that?
When it all became clear, pretty much was when it was done.
Okay.
Because in sections, I would be in the bed thinking, okay, how am I going to create this part of it? And I would have something, an idea in my head, and I would get up and try it. And I was like, that's not going to work. And go through all of these iterations, and certain sections might be complete, but the whole thing wasn't complete until it was complete.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me phrase it the other way. You had to create a theme. You had to create a storyline. And so, what was the process of creating that theme? And what's the
Well, the
process?
theme came from Tony,
Okay.
the original idea.
Okay.
And so it was just up to me to visualize that and, for lack of a better statement, put it on paper.
Mhm.
Like I said, it was intimidating. There were even times when I did it, even almost at the end, I was like, is this really what he wanted?
But there's
And
so
then,
much history. There's so much history there. How did you condense that much history into a 20-foot mural?
Well, let me jump in for a minute and help Free frame her response.
Okay.
Like Free, I've been drawing all of my life. I never remember a time when I didn't have a pencil or pen in my hand and wasn't drawing or coloring something. But I actually came to Howard University and changed my major from architecture to design, graphic design and advertising. So that's my given profession. But what I have come to realize is that I'm an all right artist, but I'm much better as an art director. I'm very good at coming up with ideas and concepts and then giving those ideas to people who are better artists than I and having them execute. So that's what my relationship has been with Sister Free. So I gave her my ideas and I kind of laid out where certain information would go on the timeline. And she is the one who just brought everything together such that it resulted in a seamless narrative.
Well, let me ask you the question here then. Who selected the images? In other words, who selected the architecture? Who decided that the beginning should start with the sort of a vastness of darkness, almost a creation?
Me, present,
Okay.
me. Again, I have the ideas, right? And sometimes my ideas are bigger than the reality that will contain those ideas. But what I found in working with Free is that she was able to take my idea and render it in such a way that the end result was better than what I had originally imagined. All right. And that's that's a gift. That's a talent, right? And it also has been a phenomenal partnership that has profoundly increased, my love for Free and my appreciation for what she does as an artist. So
That's a powerful statement, Tony.
well, it's the truth. It's the truth.
Well,
But let me say this. Let me say this.
Let me ask Bree.
Hold on now. This is my show. I'm doing the interviews here. Let me ask the questions, damn it. But to go through all of that, but then to have you come and then take what Free and I have created and then render it in words just takes it to another level. So, brother, I really appreciate how you took what we had created and then created something grander with your words. So it's the fulfillment of our desire for this project to expand people's consciousness,
Yeah.
have us engage in the conversation about who we were, who we are, and who we must become.
And I actually felt like when I saw your words, and I will admit I haven't looked at the whole thing yet, but from what I did see, it felt like jazz to me. And I'm like, I don't even know if I totally know what jazz is, but that felt like jazz to me.
Well,
And it moves, and it was just awesome.
now I'm becoming the focus.
Yes.
I'm blushing.
But can I say one thing about I want to move on to another wall, the wall that's right across from the Nile to the Potomac, which is still on the Potomac. When Tony, that was my most challenging piece because
Wait. Now, which image is that? Is that
the one, the museum,
Yeah,
the
the
museum.
National Museum. Yes.
Yes. Because when I saw your idea, I was like, is he trying to say that fountain is the same fountain that's inside? Because you had your sketch of the museum and then something under it that looked like it was the fountain.
All right. So what?
And when I realized you
brothers
did,
and sisters, is the Oculus that's
Yeah.
at the Constitution Avenue entrance to the museum, and 30 feet below the Oculus is the contemplative court, where
Yes.
people are encouraged to come into this room, which is actually a cube, to rest, renew, and recharge after having witnessed the Ma'afa in the lower floors of the museum. And there's this waterfall. And once I began going to the museum and studying the architecture and the symbolism in the museum, I realized what those architects had skillfully done. And they couldn't come out and say what they wanted to say, but they could represent it architecturally. And I knew that I was one of few people who realized what they had done. And so when I gave you that sketch, Free, I wanted you to, give life to this abstract thought. And again, you did a masterful job of rendering something even better than I could have conceived it. And that piece is also one of my standout pieces. So folk are really gonna have to come down to the Thurgood Marshall Center
right.
in order to see all of this and understand what we're jabbering about. So can you give some details, Free?
Can I also say that before I did that piece, I've been to the museum several times. I didn't even realize that those two things were the same thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, now I got to go back and check it out. I mean, I learned so much from doing this project.
Yeah.
And everyone can see exactly what they were talking about if they come out on Saturday, April the 12th to the Thurgood Marshall Center and check out the John Henrik Clarke Enhanced History Project on the second floor. from 2 to 4 p.m. and the address is 1816 12th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be there to look at it again as well and see. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
And hopefully we can ask you to make some comments, share some comments about the mural, and you know, in the process.
Before we run out of time,
Mhm.
when we get to when we get to the day, we get to the museum.
Sure.
Then and above the museum of all the great things that are in the museum, the
Mhm.
scientists, the sports people, the business people, they're hovering over the rendering of the museum. And then next to that is the Washington Monument. So the Washington Monument, or the Tekken, anchors it today, starting with the Tekken that started 8,000 years ago. And then to the right of the Tekken, is Brother Ah suspended above a tree, blowing his horn that you mentioned earlier, Tony, saying that we both responding to the extent that we need to recapture ourselves, we need to relearn, we need to reposition, and we need to remember our greatness, and not only remember it. And you mentioned Brothers Ah's work on WPFW, carried into our everyday life.
Absolutely. And if I can, add to that description, Jerome, we have I don't remember if I put this thought out here or if you put the thought out there. We had the building, but we have these ancestors rising up out of the building, right?
Yes.
So the building is symbolically shaped like a shrine house. And a shrine house is a structure where the spirits of ancestors reside. So all of these ancestors, there's artifacts within the museum of ancestors. There's images of ancestors, and so anything anybody touch, anything anybody wears, contains their spirit or their essence. So that book is a repository of ancestors, and what you rendered free was these ancestors rising up out of the building. Brother Ah is blowing his horn, helping them to ascend, and they're ascending in order to be accessible to us, right, at this particular point in time in history. So it all comes together, so wonderfully. It really does.
And also, can I say this about that particular thing?
Sure.
I know when you came up with this project, when you conceptualized this project, you were doing it because at the African American Museum of History and Culture, there's so much of that you don't get there. You get a lot of wonderful things, but you don't get that from the Nile to the Potomac. And I put those ancestors there because a lot of those ancestors you're not going to see in the Museum of African American History and Culture. You're not going to see Dr. Wilson over there.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's that.
So look, let's do this because we got so much more to talk about and we're running out of time. So I want to put you all on hold and let me just wrap up this segment and then we're going to go into overdrive, right? So just as they used to say on the radio in Chicago, stick and stay, don't go away. We're going to continue this conversation in a minute, but I want to close out this show by referencing some things that are happening right now. They say that Newton's third law of physics is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And this is, in essence, a Eurocentric interpretation of a universal principle. Newton's law is a profound misinterpretation of sacred principles that were known in the Nile Valley and in the Niger River Valley thousands of years ago. This concept was known as Ma'at, who represents balance and harmony and order and reciprocity. Ma'at is the first symbol that is represented in that mural. That she represents the cosmos. And so we know that when things are out of balance, as they are now, there is disorder, there is disharmony, there is confusion, there is fear. So in times like these, the responsible thing to do is to become aware of the disorder and the disharmony and the confusion and the fear, but not fixate on it, not obsess over it. You correct the problem by focusing on the solution to the problem. And so, you bring things, the solution is to bring things in balance, to restore the harmony, to restore the order. You focus on Ma'at, who is the embodiment of all that is right, all that is just, all that is truthful, and all that is orderly. That's where the power is. And that is exactly where our focus should be. And that is the essence of love. So Donald Temple, whose show comes on PFW at 8 o'clock, his program is called Loveology, or the logos, or the knowledge of love, right? 50 years ago, Earth, Wind, and Fire released their greatest album, That's the Way of the World. And the last cut on side one of the album is called All About Love. That song is 6 minutes, 35 seconds long. It's the longest cut on the album. It's the most meaningful song on an album full of meaningful songs. And it's that song, which is the reason why I end each show, in each Browder File show, with the words of Maurice White, telling us that if there ain't no beauty, you got to make some beauty. So it's that beauty, it's that love that allows us to express the reality that is always inside of us, waiting for us to come back. So we're going to end this segment of the Browder File Show. I want to see you next week. Khalil, I want you to take us home. But in the meantime, Ms. Nouveau, I want you to remember that you got to say the last dance for me. And until then, until I see you next week, remember, it's all about love, and it's all about exorcising the beauty, the love that's within you. Take us out of here, Khalil. Thank you so much, my brother. And we'll see you next week.
You gotta love you.
There we go. You got to unearth all the beautiful things around you. So that was easy. That was cool. You all feeling good?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling
To the final piece. So let me open it up and go full screen. So here is the second floor. This is the wall, the eastern wall on the second floor. We see here the National Newspaper Publishers Association's logo type on the wall. So Dr. Chavis was kind enough to allow me to take all of this down. We had a painter come in and paint the entire second floor. And then this is one of the anchoring concepts for this wall, to show the out of Africa migration, and details for this out of Africa migration I got from the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, which has an exhibit that literally says 200,000 years ago, Africans were the only people on Earth. That information is now dated, and we can now go back 300,000 years. This was the rough sketch that I gave free for creating this other timeline that would showcase milestones in African history, 14 milestones. And these were some of the elements that I wanted incorporated into this illustration. I gave free this sketch, and then she came back with some mock-ups. So here's one mock-up that showcases the Nile Valley. And I wanted to extend this image beyond the Nile Valley, because there is a history that precedes Kemet Kush. So she came up with some other ideas. And then one of the other ideas that was interesting was putting Renoko's face as an anchor. But I wanted to honor the African Eve, the African woman who was the mother of mankind. So Free came up with these 6 images, but it's the one image where the sister is looking at you head on that I felt was the right one to use for that spot. So Free found that image, and then took the tree and the roots and added that, and then put the silhouette of Africa in the background, and then had the sun shining from around the tree, which just really gave, you know, a new dimension of life and spirit to this illustration. And then I felt that there should be an acknowledgement of African ancestry and the DNA. There should be a DNA strand. So she ran this DNA strand across the page, literally coming out of this African woman, and then dropped in the 14 elements along this timeline. The Sankofa image is on the left-hand side, and then we have this African, this ancestral intelligence image below the African Eve, and she is literally pouring her consciousness into this young child who is reading a book, and in reading the book, it brings to her mind, it brings to her consciousness all of these ancestors, and as well as those who have yet to be born. So all of these dimensions of time and timelessness exist in our genes, exists within us, and we have the capacity to tap into it and express this in what we create, what we sing, what we draw, what we share with the world. So Free, you want to speak on this?
One thing I'll say about this piece, first of all, I love it, is you know how you say sometimes there are no accidents? Because there was a piece, you just showed it. Well, first of all, let me say, I thought that when I thought about the Renoco, I was like, oh man, he gonna be like, yeah, Renoco, da, 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 da. But then when that didn't happen and I found that African male elder, I was like, that's it. And you were like, that's it too. And so much time went by before we got back to the piece that I couldn't find it anymore. And that's never happened before. I don't know if the artist, if the photographer, if somebody ended up buying the piece and it couldn't be used anymore, but all I know, it was gone. And the reason I know it was gone is so she could be created.
There you go.
And as far as the elder mother is concerned, I decided to use the AI piece and put in all of these different descriptions to get the mother that I wanted. And this was her. This was the one that you chose.
You said the AI piece. When you use AI, how are you using it?
There's a program called Firefly in Adobe.
Okay.
And you put in descriptions. And you can be very, very detailed in your descriptions. And I don't know if either of you have ever tried to get AI images before with people, but 9.5 times out of 10, there's always something very nutty going on with the picture. Either they'll have their hand will look like a bear claw, one eye will look like a bubble, so I just had to keep going. And then I'm like, she's the closest one that looks perfect, so I can use her and just fix those things. So that's pretty much what I did.
What did you
So
have to
again,
fix with
you're
her?
working in Adobe products, Photoshop. What other tools are you using as an artist? You said
Photoshop,
Firefly.
Illustrator, InDesign, pretty much those three.
Okay, so you're an Adobe-based person.
Yeah.
All right. Wow.
So Free, this is my first time hearing that you had to manipulate this image of the elder sister. What types of things did you have to do for her, if you recall?
Like I said, she was the most perfect one, so I just pretty much had to fix her eye. That was pretty much it with her. The rest of them, it was like, whoa.
As you mentioned, Free, that's one of the hardest things for these AI programs to do. As you mentioned, hands will have 6 fingers.
Right.
Yep. It is wild, okay? It is so wild. I don't understand it.
Well, it's a new technology and it hasn't been perfected yet. I guarantee you 4 years from now, they'll have it down pat. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll have it down pat.
I feel like this is on purpose for some reason.
I would third what Tony said and what you said, Free. This is a stunning piece. And
thank you.
So we talked about the wall overlooking the stairway where we saw the mural. This anchors the other wall.
Yes, exactly.
We've got these 2 murals. The Eve mural if you're coming up off the elevator, to the left is the Eve mural, and the right further down the hallway is the mural that we talked about.
Yes.
And that was intentional in terms of utilizing the space, Jerome. I wanted to have timelines on the eastern wall and the western wall, right? And then in between the timeline, we would have other images that would depict this migration of Africans from the Nile to the Niger.
So when you come up off the elevator, which is the eastern wall and which one is the western wall?
When you come off the elevator, your left is the east.
Okay,
That's the front of the building. Mhm.
okay, all right. And that's where the eave is.
That's where the
And then to
the
the
African
right,
milestone.
where the Niger and the Nile Valley to DC is.
Exactly. That's the mural that hangs on the wall that is on this side of the gymnasium, which is back side of the building. Mhm.
And was the installation process for the eave wall similar to the mural wall?
Yeah, it was tiled. I think that wall is 8 feet 5 inches. So it was comprised of 3 panels, 4-foot panels. Mhm.
But I'm sure it was way easier to put up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they put that up in no time. And it was a joy watching watching them do it because they had a laser level that laid out the lines, the horizontal and vertical lines, so they could make sure that they had it straight. And it was good watching them work. But what I realized in watching them work is that, the artist in me, the perfectionist in me, is looking at all the little details. So, it may not be quite straight, or you could have shifted it over a little bit more because you've got extra material at the end. It would have been nice to shift it over a little bit so that you could get all of this extra material in. Little things like that I had to talk to them about. And again, watching them hang, our baby, I'll say our baby, it's not my baby, it's our baby, on the wall. There was some things that I felt that they could do without any oversight on my part. But when I come back, I see, oh my God, they didn't shift things, or they could have done this. And so I realized I needed to be there and oversee every single step, because there was one image that I would have done a little differently. And then after it was up, because that Africa Eve image is right next to the Egypt on the Potomac piece. And so literally they had the two images side by side. And I felt that to the untrained eye, it would look like one solid piece. And I wanted a visual break. So I told them to trim, give me 6 inches on the left side of the Africa, on the right side of the African Eve, and 6 inches on the left and right side of the Egypt on the Potomac piece, so that each piece is like floating on a background of white. I don't want them to look like they're all part of one piece. So these are little judgments calls that I had to make. I wasn't anticipating them, but being there and watching as it's installed, you realize that you still have to be hands-on, because things don't always work out the way that you planned them to, and you have to make some last-minute judgment calls. But all in all, I think it worked well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Just for the listening audience or the viewing audience, since we're on YouTube, again, there are 12 exhibits.
Yes.
Plus the 4 on the pillars.
On the pillars, and the pillars are like 18 inches on 2 sides and 12 inches on 2 sides. So it's not square all the way around. It's more of a rectangle. So Bree had to design the pieces such that they could wrap 2 sides of the pillar simultaneously. So she had to do an 18-inch side and a 12-inch side on one piece, right? So that's how they installed them. And then after they had finished that Friday, and they've cleaned up and they're gone, I'm looking at everything and I realized, oh man, one of the pillars, the text is crooked. I mean, it's off center. And I'm thinking, man, can I live with this? Can I live this? No, I can't. And then Free came by to look at it, and Free said, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. So I had to call the folk up and tell them, look, you all need to come back and make some changes, right? So they were gracious. They understood how important this project was to us, how important it was to history. And the guy came back, the printer reprinted a couple of pieces, and the installer came back and made all of the corrections that we had asked in order for us to be happy, so that, you know, people such as yourself, Jerome, who come and see this will be happy as well, and it could have the impact that we wanted it to have.
Can I make a shameless plug?
Of course.
Sure. So on the central reading wall,
Uh-huh.
you have who is Drusilla Dungy?
She wrote the wonderful Ethiopians of the ancient Kushite Empire, correct?
That's right. And we, as a family, we celebrated her birthday. I think it was her 134th birthday in January of this year.
Here's the book.
She's related to you?
Well, yes, but my oldest sister, Okella, is our genealogist, family genealogist. And she's discovered in 1701 a Francis Dungy, who was married to a Saponi male. And out of that union came 2 or 3 sons. And one of those sons became the great-great-grandfather of Drusilla, and one of those sons became the great-great-great-grandfather of Jerome.
Wow. Did you know that?
No, but mine is on the maternal side. So my father, my grandfather, Sam Page, married Agnes Dungy. And Agnes Dungy is the daughter of the male line of the Dungies that go back to 1701.
Wow.
And then
So Jerome, share
Should
the
have
other
called
part
you
of
for
that
the picture.
story.
Oh, sorry.
Share the other part of that story, Jerome, about Drusilla Dungy. She's related to you. She's also related to somebody else we know.
Yeah, Paul Coates owns her as well. Paul Coates of the Black Classic
Oh, wow.
owns her as well. So yeah, that's Drusilla. And so we have that history of Drusilla Dungy there. She's on the left-hand side, the third from the top.
Right.
You have John Henrik Clarke at the top, and Asa Hilliard second, and then Dungy. And she and her brother Roscoe Dungy were chronicles of the destruction of Wall Street in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Well, let me say this. I still need to and want to go to the exhibit, not as the artist, but as the viewer. And I want to do it 2 ways. I want to do it as the artist, and I want to do it as the viewer by myself, just to internalize this whole piece and the spirit of it for myself.
And you know what I would like for you to do, Free? I like for you to come maybe at the end of in Egypt on the Potomac field trip, when we bring the groups up, and just be a fly on the wall, right? And listen to people comment on the artwork, talk about what it means. I think you'll get a kick out of that as well.
I will.
Yeah, I can't do that because everybody knows Tony Browder, but
You can wear a disguise.
wear an Afro wig or so reggae headdress or something.
Yeah.
Dreadlocks. Yeah, I could do that, but I'm always interested in seeing how people respond to a space, right? To the images in the space, to the energy that's created by the images in the space. It touches us on multiple levels. So,
well, Tony, since you have this visual up, I mean, Bree mentioned earlier in talking about developing the project that she needed a picture of a bookcase, and describe that bookcase and what kind of books are on it.
Yeah, well, this is a bookcase in my living room, and I have an entire wall in my living room that's comprised of, I think, 5 bookcases. So I decided that I would just shoot one bookcase, and I wanted to set it up since I knew this was going to be on the wall and it would be there, you know, forever, however long that is. And so I rearranged the books. You know, I moved books from one case, one shelf to another shelf to this shelf, so that as Free indicated, people will look at the books here and see, you know, what's on the shelf. And I have that book. I never heard of this book. Let me jot it down. Let me take a picture of it. So the idea that Free gave is that people will look at the 10 titles that are essential reading, and they'll take note of these 10 titles, but they'll look at the dozens and dozens of titles on the bookshelf and would hopefully become interested in reading some of those books. So I had to make sure the Van Sertima is there, Clarke is there, Ben is there, Jackson is there. I had to make sure that other books that are not a part of our mainstream consciousness be included on that on the bookshelf as well, so that folk will realize that in the study of our history, we need to study everything. We need to study everybody, and not limit it to just Black books. It takes me back to in the film John Henrik Clarke, A Great and Mighty Walk, when John Clarke first read an article written 100 years ago by Arthur Schomburg, an article titled A Negro Digs Up His Past, right? And in that article, Clarke learned for the first time that Black people had a history. He was 10 years old when he read that article. And he learned for the first time that Black people had a history that preceded enslavement. And that's what sparked his interest in reading and history and culture. And ultimately, 8 years later, he jumped on a freight train, went to New York, went to Harlem, went to the Harlem Library on 135th Street, I think where it was, and asked the librarian there, all of this is in the film, I asked the librarian, do you know someone who could write me a letter of introduction to Arthur Schomburg? And the woman said, boy, just walk up 3 flights of stairs and you'll see him there. Just get out of here. And he goes up and he sees Schomburg, and like a young, impetuous teenager, he goes to Schomburg and says, I want you to tell me the history of my people right now, henceforth, at this moment. Tell me everything you know. And Schomburg looked at him and said, boy, go study the history of your enslavement. Then study your history. And then come back and we can have a conversation.
Wow.
So, you know, that lesson is a lesson that we all need to learn, because when we're young and dumb and think we know everything, we think that we can access all there is to know without going through the process of learning how to know, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it was, Dr. Clarke credits Schomburg with teaching him how to study and how to put history in context. And that's something that's lost in this YouTube generation, where people will watch a YouTube video and all of a sudden they become an expert on something that they know nothing about. So,
well, I would add that this is a very clever and insightful and creative way to provide a bibliography for the exhibit. So one, you can look at that, the essential readings in the bookcase as a bibliography for the exhibit.
And one of the other things
The
that
question becomes, are we going to get a printout of the bibliography?
Okay, so this is what's coming. In Asa's book, Saba, Asa has the bibliography, you know.
Okay.
And there's another book that should be listed on the bookshelf. It's of a conference that Asa held, that, and 3/4 of the book is a bibliography.
Okay.
Half of that book is a bibliography, which Asa and Dr. Clarke compiled. So the materials are there for any inquisitive mind. What we also are going to add to many of the displays, Jerome, is a QR code.
Okay.
That QR code will access people with a smartphone. It will allow them to access a short video, and that video will give them additional content, visuals, and an audio that drills down a little bit deeper on that display. So what I've done with this is something similar to what I did with my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, where I essentially have 3 books in one. I've got one book is just text. Another book is illustrations and photographs, which tell a story. And then I've got a sidebar with snapshots or bite-sized pieces of information. So I've got 3 different ways for people to internalize information that will feed their souls and sustain them. And so I'm carrying that over to this exhibition so that the same thing could happen. And, you know, as an afterthought, you do this stuff, and then when you're looking at everything, I'm thinking what I could have done different or what I should have added. And I look at the bookcase and I said, damn it, I didn't put Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. I didn't put my book on there. But then I look at the books in the background behind the authors, and I see the free added Nile Valley Contributions next to Saber.
Oh yeah,
And
I can see
the
some.
Browder File below Stolen Legacy. So I'm there, right?
Okay.
I'm there.
Well, here's another bit of family lore. Drusilla Dungy grew up in a household where her father had 3,000 books.
Mm.
And so you're
Wow.
talking, you know, late 1900s, early 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she had access to a wealth of information
Right.
before she began her studies. And then as you know, the Nile Valley Civilization book was supposed to be one of 6 volumes, but the other 5 volumes got lost. So he was correcting the history of how African civilizations were used. So
You know,
I have to say see you all later.
okay.
Well, we're about to wind down anyway.
All right, Free.
And this has been such a wonderful experience for me.
Well, and you know, when I first invited you on the show, what did you tell me, Free?
I don't remember. What did I tell you?
That you're shy and you don't like to talk?
See, I couldn't even tell you that. I was so shy.
Yeah.
And it's so true, though.
Well, I'm shy too, believe it or not. But I know, you know, you're a family, and once you get started, you know, it comes out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, too. You made it easy.
All right, well, good. Then you're quite welcome.
All right. Peace and love, y'all.
See you later.
Thank you.
Peace. Peace. You know, Jerome, one more thing about this particular piece is that in the QR code, the audio for the QR code, I've got a quote from Walter Mosley. And that quote is that you can I'm paraphrasing now, you can always tell someone's consciousness by what's on their bookshelf. So I want people, when they hear that, to think about what's on their bookshelf, or they don't have one, to start a bookshelf, to start a library, so that their children can become used to seeing books in the household and become readers, so that they can become better learners and ultimately better teachers and stewards of this culture. So real quick, Atlantis, are you still there? Are you listening to us in the background?
I am here. I am listening.
Okay, well, good. Can you just chime in again? And one of the things that we're going to do, Jerome, is we're going to do a publication that will have all of the graphics in the publication, and what I would like to do, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you would be willing to partner with me on that project, because the piece that you wrote about the Africa Eyes mural is so good. I would like to include that in this publication, and if you would be so inclined. Um,
Just send me the release forms. I'll be glad to sign them.
No problem. Always the technician. Okay.
No, I don't. I'm just saying, I'd be glad to contribute to it.
But what I like to do, man, and this is making the best of our efforts, because to be honest with you, Jerome, when I read your piece, your description of the Africa Eyes murals, I said, damn, this is good. Jerome is good. He's a better writer than I am. So yeah, let me not try to write something on this. Let me just ask Jerome if I can use what he's written. And so you had talked about the possibility of writing brief descriptions of the other pieces. And
Yes.
so what I would, invite you to do, if you're willing, if you have the time, to do maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs on the other murals.
Sure,
And
I'd be
then
glad
that would be the text that would accompany each of these images, along with some other background information. And I want that to be a small book that people will be able to purchase, so that they can take this living library with them.
Mhm.
And then also, since this is going to be a permanent exhibit at the Thurgood Marshall Center, I like for the Thurgood Marshall Center themselves to also be able to sell some of the books to folk who will come to see the exhibit, and then use the proceeds from the sale to be able to maintain the exhibit.
Right.
Um,
I'd
so
I'd love to contribute to that project.
Okay, great. And it's something that probably we won't do until the fall,
Mhm.
because I've got to finish up Browder File 3, and then uh, we're traveling this summer, and so this is the project I don't want to rush into, but we'll do that. And then also Atlantis, we talked about uh, expanding that book project and incorporating a curriculum, if you will, that will lay out the entire history of African people from the Nile to the Niger, such that the Clarke Enhanced History Project could be used as a textbook to teach African history. And it could be a project that will help those people who now begin to understand how valuable this information is, now that the Nazis in the White House are trying to erase it.
Mhm.
Folk will have in one simple publication a broader overview, a very complex and detailed history. And then from the bibliography that will accompany this piece, they can drill down deeper into any subject matter that is of personal, you know. So that's the larger vision. And Atlantis, I really
I think
want you to take the lead in pulling that publication together.
And I think one of the beauties of the project is the African Eyes Project, as well as the other 12 exhibits. It's not just studying the history, and studying the history gives us pride, it gives us anchors, but it also allows us to live more fully today and to bring into fruition the vision of what that history has to offer. So when we leave the exhibit, we not only have expanded our minds, but we have opened up our visions to be. And the challenge now is to create the world in the image of what we just saw.
Yeah. And Jerome, you really hit the nail on the head, because that's the concept that is expressed in that image, that small image in the lower left-hand corner of the Milestones in African History exhibit, where we have the idea of Sankofa to Kofa. Everybody talks about Sankofa, to go back and reclaim the knowledge of the past, But my thing has always been, what are you going to do with the information after you get it? To just hold on to it and say that you know it means nothing. You can't apply that knowledge in your life today. So it's about giving people a black print, if you will, for how to apply historical information in your life today so that you can create the future that your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, 7 generations into the future will inherit this knowledge and build on the legacy that you have bequeathed. To me, that's the whole purpose for all of this study. You can't build for the future, you're wasting.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you. Atlantis, you want to say anything before we leave?
Well, I'm definitely enjoying the conversation, and I trust that the listeners are doing the same and learning something new. And again, I want to encourage those who are interested, who have the time and energy to support the CIP program and find out how you can bring it to your community. And I want to encourage them to visit our website, ikgcip.com, to learn more information and to connect with us and make it happen.
Great. Thank you, Atlantis.
Thank you.
Jerome, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Well, I can put in a selfless plug again.
Oh,
If
of
somebody wants to
course.
find out more about me, www.whatsonjeromesmind.com. What's on Jerome's Mind is spelled out with no spaces, hyphens, or punctuation.
So,
go ahead.
Jerome, just give those in our viewing audience an overview of the types of things that you do.
Okay, well, let me say, well, one way to easily frame it, it's for the last few years I've had a annual project. So for my 75th birthday, or that year, my 75th year, I had what I call the 75 Breaths Project. And so I chronicled meditations, short meditations around the breath for 75 days. And then for my 76th year, I did my spiritual jazz and meditation work jam sessions. And that focused on, now Free was, I didn't get the chance to respond to Free. She said the piece read like it was jazz. And I spent the year in my 76th year with my spiritual jazz and meditation jam sessions. And we looked at many of the artists between 1965 and 1974, the Alice Coltrane's, John Coltrane's, the Archie Sheps, the Pharoah Sanders, Ornette Coleman, Sonny Rollins, the list goes on and on. And so that was my 70, I'm in my 77th year now. And I have the project is called Symphony 77. And I have a inquiry circles where curiosity, when questions meet, where we explore curiosity in looking at issues that are facing the world today. And that's on the first Fridays of each month, starting in January through July.
Okay. And all of these projects are on the website that you referenced?
Yeah, whatsonjeromesmind.com, yes.
Okay. And do you have an archive of the programs that you've done previously?
I don't have an archive for the programs done previously. That's in the works.
Okay. Well,
But I mean, what you'll find on the website are my blogs.
Okay. Okay. So you do have recordings of those programs that you've done, correct?
Most of them, yes.
Okay. So, you could very easily do what I'm doing with my radio show, get a YouTube channel and then post all of those videos on that YouTube channel. And there you go. You're following in the footsteps of Sister Drusilla.
The challenge, as you mentioned in the previous discussion, it's recorded music and it's copyrighted.
True.
Yeah. So
Um,
that's the challenge. I don't know what to do with that yet, but
well, no, I have a suggestion. What you can do is you can edit out the music, right? And just so we'll talk offline about how you could do that, because I'm sure the conversation itself is priceless.
yes.
And people can watch the video while they play the music, at home, and
That's
still
true.
and still get the essence. So there's ways to do that
Mhm.
and not run into those copyright problems.
All right, well, I'll take you up on your offer.
Okay, for sure, for sure. All right. So Jerome, thank you so much. Atlantis, thank you. Free is gone. We've thanked her, and I also want to thank the listeners and the viewers of this program. This is the Overdrive segment of the Browder File Show. I trust you enjoyed it. I trust you will come out to the Thurgood Marshall Center when you're in Washington, D.C. The center is located at 1816 12th Street Northwest. It's open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and from 9 until 3 on Saturdays. The exhibit is on the second floor, is free and open to the public. And we invite you to come and study our history before others attempt to erase it. This is Tony Browder. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Peace. All right.